The night was cold, sharp, and unforgiving, the kind of night that scraped against your soul. Alexander Vance, a billionaire known for his ruthlessness in business and detachment in life, sat in the back of his black Rolls-Royce, eyes fixed on the city lights flickering past. He had just left another charity gala, another night of forced smiles and hollow toasts. The world saw a man who had it all: wealth, power, and prestige. But beneath that immaculate exterior, Alexander carried a void he never dared to fill. The driver slowed as they approached a dimly lit intersection. A few homeless people huddled around a rusted barrel fire. Alexander barely glanced, until one figure caught his attention. A woman, thin, her coat too small for the cold, her hand protectively cradling a swollen belly. Something about her stance, her profile, struck him like a ghost emerging from the fog of memory. "Stop the car," he said sharply. The driver hesitated. "Sir, this isn't a safe area." "I said stop." Alexander stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the cracked pavement. The air stung his face as he approached her slowly. The woman flinched, clutching her stomach as if shielding her unborn child from the world. When her eyes met his, time fractured. "Lila," he whispered, disbelief strangling his voice. Her breath caught. For a moment, her face, gaunt yet hauntingly familiar, softened with a mixture of shock and pain. "Alex." It was her. Lila Carter. The woman he had loved once, the woman he had driven away. She looked nothing like the vibrant, fiery soul he'd fallen for years ago. Her hair was tangled, her lips pale, her hands trembling. Yet those eyes still held the same storm that once drew him in and destroyed him all at once. "What happened to you?" he murmured, as if asking the question to himself. Lila laughed bitterly. "You happened, Alex." The words cut deeper than she could have known. He gestured for his coat, shrugging it off and wrapping it around her shoulders. "You can't stay out here. Come with me. I'll get you help." But she pulled back, suspicion flaring. "Help? Like the help you gave me when your lawyers ruined my life? When you chose your empire over me?" He froze. "That's not, Lila, I didn't know what they did. Save it." She turned away, eyes glistening. "It doesn't matter anymore." He stared at her, noticing now the way her hand rested protectively on her stomach. "You're pregnant." Her silence was answer enough. And then, as if lightning struck his chest, a horrifying realization began to form. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Lila, how far along are you?" She looked away. 7 months. His heart stopped. Their last encounter, that night before she disappeared, had been exactly 7 months ago. Alexander stumbled back, his breath shallow. "Lila, is it mine?" Her eyes flickered with something: pain, fear, defiance. "You lost the right to ask me that." He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his hair. "You can hate me all you want, but I won't let you live like this. Not you. Not them." He glanced at her belly, his voice breaking for the first time in years. She wanted to walk away, she really did. But her body was tired, her hope brittle, and the bitter wind cut too deep. Finally, she whispered, "One night. I'll stay one night." Alexander nodded, relief flooding his face. He guided her into the car, silence thick between them. The city lights blurred into gold and blue streaks as they drove through the night. In the backseat, Lila rested her hand on her stomach, feeling the faintest kick beneath her palm. She caught Alexander's reflection in the window, the same man she once loved, but changed, colder, harder, and yet, in his eyes tonight, there was something she hadn't seen in years. Regret. When they reached his penthouse, she hesitated at the door, the same world she once belonged to but had been exiled from. He turned to her gently. "You're safe here." Lila didn't respond. She walked in slowly, the marble floors gleaming beneath her worn shoes. Every corner whispered of a life she could have had, and lost. As she sat down on the couch, exhaustion overtaking her, Alexander stood watching her, not as a billionaire, not as a man in control, but as someone seeing the ghost of his past, breathing before him. And then, from somewhere deep inside the silence, Lila's voice broke softly. "You think you can fix this, Alex? Some things don't get fixed. They just haunt you differently." He took a seat across from her, his voice low. "Then let me be haunted with you." For the first time, Lila's eyes softened. A tear slipped down her cheek, one she didn't bother to hide. Outside, the city slept under a blanket of rain, unaware that two broken hearts were about to collide again, and nothing would ever be the same after tonight. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Lila awoke to the scent of coffee and the quiet hum of the city below. For a fleeting second, she felt peace, until she realized where she was. Alexander was standing by the window, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. When he noticed she was awake, he ended the call. "I've arranged a doctor to come by this afternoon. You need a full checkup." She frowned. "You don't have to do that." "I do," he replied simply. But before she could answer, something in his voice made her pause, the edge of fear. Fear that he might lose something he never thought he wanted. She sighed. "You always were good at taking control, weren't you?" He smirked faintly. "Only when I'm losing everything else." For a moment, they both stood in the fragile quiet, two people tethered by a past neither could escape, and a future neither yet understood. But deep down, in a part of him he never admitted to anyone, Alexander knew this was only the beginning. Lila shifted on the couch, feeling the softness beneath her aching body, a sensation she hadn't known in months. The warmth of the penthouse surrounded her like a foreign embrace, and yet it made her uneasy. Every inch of this place screamed of the life she'd lost, the marble floors, the glass walls, the faint scent of the cologne she once loved. She felt small here, almost invisible. Alexander poured a cup of coffee and set it gently on the table in front of her. "It's decaf," he said quietly. Her eyes flickered with faint surprise. He remembered. She accepted the cup, her trembling fingers brushing his. The touch sent a ripple of memory through both of them, a flash of laughter, late nights by the fireplace, whispered promises that once felt eternal. She quickly pulled her hand back, her chest tightening. "Why are you doing this, Alex?" He hesitated, looking out toward the skyline where the morning sun painted the glass towers in gold. "Because I owe you more than you'll ever know," he said finally. "And because if that child is mine." Her voice sharpened. "If, after everything." He turned, meeting her gaze. "Lila, I don't want to assume anything. You disappeared without a word. I tried to find you. I didn't know what happened." Her laugh was bitter. "You didn't know because you didn't want to. You let your lawyers handle everything. I was just another problem to erase." His jaw tightened. "That's not true." She stood, her voice trembling. "You think money fixes everything, Alex. But it doesn't fix betrayal. It doesn't fix a broken heart, or the night I walked out of our home with nothing but a suitcase and a secret growing inside me." Alexander took a step closer, his voice soft but edged with desperation. "Why didn't you tell me, Lila? Why didn't you come to me?" Tears burned her eyes. "Because I knew what you'd do. You'd claim control over everything, even this child. You'd make me feel like I owed you for existing. I couldn't let you own that part of me too." He stared at her, speechless. For once, the man who commanded boardrooms, who bent markets to his will, had no words. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until the sound of rain against the windows broke it. Lila sank back onto the couch, pressing her hand against her stomach. The baby kicked, a soft, insistent flutter, and a fragile smile ghosted across her lips. Alexander watched her, a strange ache tightening in his chest. He'd built empires, conquered cities, but in this moment, he realized how little he truly possessed. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. I was too focused on building something I thought mattered. But every deal, every company, every success, none of it ever filled the space you left." She looked at him, her defenses trembling. "You always say the right things when it's too late." "Then maybe," he whispered, "it's not too late this time." Before she could respond, a knock came at the door. Alexander turned to answer it. The doctor had arrived. Lila watched as a polite woman in her 40s entered, carrying a medical bag. Alexander stepped aside while the doctor examined Lila in the guest room, his nerves coiling tighter with each passing minute. When the doctor emerged, she gave a small reassuring smile. "She's healthy. The baby's fine, just needs rest, good food, and stability." Her gaze softened. "She's been through a lot." Alexander nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you." As the doctor left, he lingered outside the room, listening to the faint rhythm of Lila's breathing. 1,000 thoughts collided in his mind, memories of their first apartment, the laughter that used to echo through the halls, and the way she looked at him when she believed in him. Before ambition had turned love into collateral. When he finally walked back in, she was sitting up, a blanket around her shoulders. "She said the baby's fine," she murmured. He nodded. "That's all that matters." Lila glanced up at him, studying his face. There were faint lines near his eyes now, traces of sleepless nights and unspoken guilt. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. "You've changed," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "So have you." For a moment, silence settled again. Not heavy this time, but fragile, like glass on the edge of shattering or mending. "Do you still paint?" he asked suddenly. Her lips parted in surprise. "You remember that?" He chuckled softly. "I remember everything. The way you'd stay up till dawn painting the city from the balcony. You said the lights reminded you of dreams, distant but alive." Lila blinked, emotion swelling in her chest. "I haven't painted in years." "Then start again," he said simply. "I'll have a room set up for you." She frowned. "You don't need to." "I want to." His eyes were sincere. "You shouldn't lose the parts of yourself that made you, you." Something inside her cracked then, a quiet fracture of resentment giving way to something softer. She nodded slightly, unable to meet his gaze. Hours passed. The rain turned into mist, and the city grew quiet. Lila dozed off again, exhaustion dragging her under. Alexander sat nearby, watching her sleep, his mind spiraling through memories. The night they met at a gallery, her laughter when she spilled wine on his suit, the way she used to steal his shirts and wear them like armor. He had everything, yet sitting here, all he could think of was how much he'd lost. His phone buzzed. It was Ethan, his business partner. "Alex, you're missing the board call," Ethan's voice crackled. "I'm not coming," Alexander said quietly. There was a pause. "Is everything okay?" "No," he said, glancing at Lila, "but it might be, one day." When he hung up, he turned off his phone completely, for the first time in years. He stood by the window again, watching the lights fade beneath the drifting fog. Somewhere deep down, a decision was forming, a decision that would change everything he'd built. Because no empire, no wealth, no reputation mattered if it meant living without the people who made him human. Lila stirred in her sleep, murmuring something too faint to catch. Alexander moved closer, gently adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. She looked peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. His gaze lingered on her hand resting over her stomach. The thought hit him again, *mind star. The word pulsed in his chest, equal parts or in terror. He whispered to the sleeping figure, "I'll fix this, Lila. I swear it." But even as he said it, a shadow crossed his mind, the memory of someone else. A woman's voice on the phone a few weeks ago. "You don't know the full story, Alex. Things aren't what you think." His heart thudded. He hadn't thought about that call since the day it came. A block number, a voice he didn't recognize. But now, as he looked at Lila, the words replayed like an echo. He didn't know what it meant yet. But something told him the truth, about her disappearance, about the year she vanished, was far more complicated than he'd ever imagined. He looked at her again, his chest tightening with something that felt too close to fear. Because deep down, Alexander Vance knew one thing: the past never stays buried forever. And whatever secret Lila was still keeping, it was about to surface. Morning light poured through the windows like liquid gold, soft and deceptive in its pace. Lila sat on the balcony wrapped in a shawl, staring down at the city that once felt unreachable, the same city that had chewed her up and spat her out. Behind her, Alexander watched silently, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in his hand. It had been 3 days since he'd found her. 3 days of quiet meals, long stares, and unspoken truths. He'd cleared his schedule completely, ignoring the calls, the meetings, the empire waiting for him. The world could wait. For once in his life, Alexander Vance was exactly where he needed to be. But that uneasy silence between them carried a pulse, something unfinished, something waiting. When Lila finally turned to face him, there was both strength and fear in her eyes. "You're wasting your time, Alex. Once I'm strong enough, I'll leave. You don't have to do all this." He stepped forward, his voice steady. "I'm not doing this because I have to. I'm doing it because I should have never let you go, Her lips trembled, but she looked away. You don't understand. Some things can't be undone. Then let me prove you wrong. Before she could answer, the intercom buzzed sharply. The security guard's voice crackled through. Sir, there's someone here asking for Miss Carter. Says it's urgent. Lila froze. Her fingers clutched the edge of the table, the color draining from her face. Alexander frowned. Who? The guard hesitated. A woman, sir. Says her name is Evelyn Hart. The name hung in the air like a blade. Alexander's expression hardened. Evelyn Hart, his former assistant. The one who had worked closely with him during the chaos after Lila's disappearance. Lila's breathing quickened. Send her up, she said quietly. Alexander turned to her. You know her. Lila's eyes were distant. Too well. Moments later, the elevator chimed, and Evelyn stepped out. She looked immaculate, as always, sleek black dress, confident posture, but there was a nervousness in her eyes that Alexander had never seen before. Mr. Vance, she greeted, her voice measured. Miss Carter. Lila rose slowly, her hand on her belly. Why are you here? Evelyn's facade faltered. Because I can't live with it anymore. You deserve to know the truth, both of you. Alexander's pulse quickened. What truth? Evelyn looked from him to Lila, guilt flickering across her face. The night you two had that fight, I was the one who sent those legal papers to her apartment. You didn't authorize them, Alexander. You were out of the country. But your father, she swallowed hard. He wanted her gone. He said she was a distraction. He made me deliver the documents that ended everything. Lila's eyes filled with tears, her breath coming in ragged waves. Your father, she whispered. He was behind it. Alexander felt the room tilt, the air leave his lungs. His father, the man who built the Vance Empire, had always believed emotion was weakness. He'd warned Alexander that love made men reckless. And Alexander, too blind and too ambitious, never saw the strings being pulled around him. He took a step back, running a trembling hand through his hair. Evelyn, why didn't you tell me? Because he threatened me, she said, her voice breaking. He said if I spoke, I'd never work again. And when Miss Carter disappeared, I thought it was what he wanted. She turned to Lila, tears glistening. I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were pregnant. Lila's entire body shook. Her anger, her pain, her years of silence, all of it surged at once. You destroyed my life, she whispered. You made me believe he chose business over me. You made me run. I was a coward, Evelyn said, tears spilling down her cheeks. And I will never forgive myself. Alexander stared at the two women, the truth crashing over him like a storm. All those years he spent hating himself, drowning in guilt, believing he'd driven her away, when all along it was manipulation. His father's manipulation. His hands clenched into fists. Where is he now? Evelyn's voice was small. Gone. He passed away last year. The words should have brought relief, but instead, they left a hollow ache in his chest. There would be no confrontation, no justice, only the ruins of what his father's ambition had cost him. Lila turned away, tears streaking down her face. All those nights. I begged myself to believe you loved me. That somewhere inside that cold man, there was still the one who used to hold me and talk about a family. Her voice cracked. And now to know it was all a lie forced on us, I don't know if I should be angry or relieved. Alexander approached her slowly. Then be both. Hate me if you need to, but don't walk away again. She met his eyes, searching for the man she once knew. I don't know if I can trust you. He exhaled, stepping closer, his voice barely a whisper. Then let me earn it. One day at a time. For you, for the child. For a long, trembling moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the city far below, indifferent, eternal. Finally, Lila looked up, her hands still on her belly. What if it's too late, Alex? What if the damage is done? He smiled softly, his eyes glistening. Then we start from the damage. Together. Her lips parted, her heart thudding painfully in her chest. For the first time in years, she saw something in his gaze she hadn't seen before. Not power, not pride, but humility. The man she'd loved once had returned, scarred but real. Evelyn turned to leave, her face pale. Before she stepped into the elevator, she whispered, "Make it right this time." When she was gone, silence filled the room again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy with possibility. Alexander reached for Lila's hand. She didn't pull away. He looked down her stomach, at the life between them, a second chance neither had expected. "You know," he said quietly, "I never thought I'd be afraid of anything. But now, the idea of losing you again, it terrifies me." Lila's eyes softened, tears spilling freely now. "You already lost me once, Alex. Don't make me regret finding you again." "I won't," he promised. "Not this time." Days turned into weeks. The news of Alexander Vance's mysterious disappearance from his company stirred rumors in the media, but he didn't care. He sold his penthouse, stepped down as CEO, and bought a quiet estate by the coast, far from the noise, the power, the ghosts. There, surrounded by ocean air and quiet sunsets, Lila began to heal. The anger melted slowly, replaced by something fragile but growing. One evening, she stood barefoot on the sand, the wind playing with her hair, her belly now heavy with life. Alexander joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. They watched the sun sink into the horizon, two silhouettes against the dying light, holding the pieces of a broken past they'd finally begun to mend. She whispered, "Do you think people can really start over?" He smiled faintly. "I think they can learn to build again, not what was lost, but something new." And for the first time in years, Lila believed him. When their child was born, a boy with her eyes and his father's stubbornness, the world seemed to pause. Alexander held him with trembling hands, his chest swelling with something deeper than pride. He looked at Lila, exhausted but radiant, and said, "He's perfect." She smiled weakly. "His ours." He kissed her forehead. "Everything I have, everything I am, it's his now. And yours." Months later, when the baby was old enough to laugh, Alexander found himself sitting on the porch, watching Lila paint again. The canvas captured the sea, the sky, and a small house nestled between them. When she caught him watching, she smiled. "You know," she said softly, "I used to dream of this. A place where nothing was about power or money. Just us." He looked at her, his eyes filled with quiet devotion. "Dreams are meant to be chased. I just took too long to catch this one." She laughed, the sound light and genuine. For the first time, there was no bitterness in it. Behind them, the baby cooed softly, sunlight filtering through the curtains like a blessing. Alexander wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You once told me the lights of the city reminded you of dreams," he murmured. "But I think dreams look more like this, messy, real, and worth every second." Lila turned her head, meeting his gaze. "And what about the past?" He kissed her cheek. "The past built us, but it doesn't own us anymore." She smiled, leaning back into him as the sound of the waves echoed around them. For the first time in both their lives, they weren't running, not from pain, not from guilt, not from love. And as the sun dipped low, casting its final golden glow over the sea, Alexander realized something he'd spent his entire life missing. Wealth could fill a mansion, but love filled the soul. The tide rolled in, the wind whispered through the trees, and the world, at last, felt still. Because sometimes, the richest man is simply the one who finds his way back to what truly matters.